So welcome everyone to our today's appointments workshop with our very own Secretary Cathryn Rivera from the Governor Newsom's office. I'm Alex Lee, your state assembly member for the 25th Assembly District, which of course covers our beautiful northern Santa Clara County and southern Alameda County. And certainly your opportunities to serve the state of California do not stop right at our county or city boundaries, but it could serve the entire state of California. So I wanted to thank you all for coming here. You know, there are dozens of commissions and boards that you can apply for at every level of government, especially the state, but of course the county and even the city level, which I'm going to mention a little bit at the end today. But there are commissions for everyone, from youth boards to senior care commissions, and even boards related to nursing, agriculture, or athletics. Now, these boards help shape California's future and give the opportunity to directly participate in Californians' governance. I serve also on the Committee for Business Professions, where a lot of the boards related to businesses and professions are governed that way, but folks usually get appointed that way as well. And today we're very lucky to be joined by the Appointment Secretary for Governor Gavin Newsom, Cathryn Rivera. The Appointment Secretary Rivera was appointed by the governor in 2019. And before her appointment, she previously served on 3 administrations as a board member on the Agricultural Labor Relations Board, starting in 2002. And she will be walking us through the process of how to apply for a state board or commission and what the governor's office is looking for and how you can get started. So I'm going to turn it over now to Secretary for her presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Assemblymember, for inviting me into this discussion. It's really important for the administration to get opportunities for this type of outreach. I will start by saying that heading into a governor's last term, it is very normal to see a lot of change. And it's going to continue at every level, including the secretaries, directors, all the way down to boards and commissions. And in addition to that, thanks to the legislature and also through legislation and the budget process, we are really addressing a lot of issues throughout the state of California, in addition to what was in existence before this administration. So we are pretty much closing in on about 4,000 appointments for the state of California, which is more than any other state. It's actually more than the federal government. So you can imagine it's a pretty large job, which is why I have 12 people that make up the appointments unit to help with filling all of those positions. Some of you may be familiar with the appointments process, but for those that are not, I really hope that tonight I can really demystify that process and really hopefully prompt you to consider applying yourself or encouraging others to apply. I think there is a belief that the appointments process is an insider game, but I will tell you that with the number of slots that we need to fill, we would not get very far if we just relied on people we knew. So we really do have to rely on our application process, which is online at the www.gov.ca website. In addition to the application, you will find a list of board and commission vacancies that we try to update monthly. You will find a list of deputies and their portfolios, which is something that I added when I came on to be the appointments secretary, to make it easier for people to get information if they have a specific appointment that they're considering, or if they want to know maybe what have additional questions about the process. Having been on the other side of this process several times, there were a lot of experiences that I had that I really hoped now as the appointment secretary that I could be more helpful and more transparent so that people would feel like they were being welcomed in and could have their questions answered. And so my deputies are very open and willing to engaging in that process with candidates. And then in addition to that, I added a list of current paid opportunities within the administration. So these are jobs if you are looking to actually join the administration in a paid capacity. It's a very simple list. It's not very fancy, and we do try to update monthly, but it is a snapshot of the current administration needs. And I see that list growing in the near future. So if you're ready for a career change, I encourage you to take a look. I will start by saying that the most common question I get when it comes to appointments is, what is the governor looking for? And I repeat what he has said many times, and that is that he truly wants an administration that looks like the people it serves. When I interviewed with him and we had this discussion, I will be honest, I've said this before, I had just been confirmed to another term at the Agricultural Labor Relations Board. I had 4 years left. So I was pretty comfortable in a job that I enjoyed immensely. So I wasn't necessarily looking to jump ship. And I did not know the governor other than voting for him, but I did see colleagues that I had known and worked with for 20 years going into the administration. So I knew he had to be the real deal. But when we talked about appointments, I said, if you truly want that, you're going to have to do things differently. You're going to have to allow for learning curves. You're going to have to step on some political toes that sometimes people don't want to step on. And you're going to have to look outside of the box and not necessarily go to the same sources that you always go to. And he said, absolutely, I'm on board. Let's do this. So when we talk about how we accomplish that, there's a lot of talk about diversity. And in the state of California, we know gender. I mean, we have over 50% of appointees who identify as female within our administration. And we know ethnicity. We also are very fortunate to just have such a diverse population. But what we talk about is diversity of experiences. It is geography. It is our upbringing. It is about what has led us to want to serve, essentially. And that is really what matters most to this governor. It is the reason why somebody like myself, who was the the daughter of parents who grew up as farm workers, who had me when they were only 20. I went to first grade in clothes that my mother made for me. It's an experience that I carry with me on a daily basis when I think about the struggles of the families in California during COVID, when I was tasked with moving over to emergency services instead of appointments because of my previous cabinet experience. It was something that I saw on a daily basis. This governor tried to address, and everybody rowing the same way to try to really help and serve those families that were struggling and many are still struggling, of course, we know. So it really is about what is it in your background, either personally or professionally, that is going to make you the right fit for a certain position. I will say that in order to establish that, the application is very detailed and it asks some very sensitive questions. My advice to individuals is to share your story for the reason I just described. I often have people say that, I didn't want to apply because there was some part of their work or personal life where, they thought it would take them out of being a candidate. And I said, this governor knows that people have had many varied experiences, both successes and failures. And if you happen to have a comeback story, this governor is here for it more than any other one. So just please don't take yourself out of the game. For us, our applications are confidential. Nobody sees them, not even the governor, nobody within the governor's office other than appointment staff. And they are not subject to any disclosure. And so I would say the primary is to be honest and really take advantage of the opportunity to share about yourself. And if there is something you do have a question about, again, talking to a deputy and letting us kind of work through that. We really just want people to, realize that, we have, for example, we have Norma Kumpian. She served time she was battered before the battered when women's syndrome existed defense. She had been beaten while she was pregnant and ended up serving time. She did end up getting out, but this governor decided to put her as the first person who would ever serve time on the Board of State and Community Corrections. So when I talk about lived experiences and actually following through with that, that's a prime example, but it's not an anecdote. It's something that we really do look at across the board. Now, when we review applications, we will look at what areas people might have be interested in. But what usually happens is in a board of commission, we are looking at what gap has been created when a person rolls off of their term. Because many times these boards are puzzles that we are trying to put together. So we will look at, is this a management person? Was it somebody that might have had a financial background? Was it an attorney? Was it a marketing person, crisis management, nonprofit manager? And we look at that, then we look at geography and to see if there are any gaps there, as well as the diversity of gender and everything else I've discussed. That is what we put into our system. And those are the individuals that we pull out. So the downside is you could put your name in for a certain board or commission and you may not be called. Sometimes they don't overlap. But the upside is that you could get a call for a board or commission that you didn't even think about, but that we think you might be a good fit for. It's very funny because many times people will say to us when we call them, I'm sorry I didn't pick up. We thought you were I thought you were a telemarketer, and I said I am a telemarketer. I was like, you didn't ask for me to call you about this, but guess what? I have something you might want to consider and see if it's something that you might want to take on. So it very much is that type of a process, and we really are trying to find the right fit. So it's also okay to say no, if that's not the right fit for you, and it's not going to stop us from calling you the next time your name comes up, or maybe for the one that you actually applied for. We really are just interested in it being the right fit. What I will say is if there is a position that absolutely this is the one that you want, I suggest Googling it. I suggest going to the website for that board, because there are so many boards and commissions and they are all so different as far as where they meet, how often they meet, what type of work commitment. You can see the minutes, you can see the agendas, you can see how complex the issues are, how long the meetings are, the contact, you can see the type of people that are currently serving on that board. The other thing that it will tell you, which is also important, is how controversial a board might be, so that you know that if you're not the type of person that wants to see your name in the paper, it's a good way to find out whether that might be a possibility, because that's not for everybody either. Once we settle on a group of applications where the candidate agrees to be considered, there is a series of interviews. It starts usually at an executive officer or department, and then moves to agency, and then moves to the governor's office. Every single appointee is interviewed by an appointments deputy, along with the appropriate policy, comms, whatever the position might be, deputy as well within the governor's office. And that is really meant, hopefully, not to be scary, because again, that is just our opportunity to really get to know you and your story, because that is what we end up sharing with the governor. So when I go in with the governor, which I do pretty much maybe every other week, and we're taking in, just to give you an idea of the cadence, we're taking in, 40, 50 people each time we're going in. Again, he doesn't ask me where they went to school, how many awards they have. He really wants to know, okay, talk to me about their experience. And that's what we write up in the candidate summary for him. And that is what we discuss with him. He makes a decision about whether to approve that individual. And at that point, we start working on bios and the press release. And then that's really when the work begins. I will just add, because I'm looking forward to getting to the questions, and is that there's also something you will see that might be an SC, or might actually say Senate confirmable. Again, please don't let that deter you. That is a process whereby the Senate essentially does their own interview of a candidate, because they ultimately vote on the governor's appointees. We have an individual in our shop whose entire role is to help you through that process. I have been through it, again, 4 times. And so it really is not meant to be a scary process. And again, we work with you through that. And at that point, we hand you off to really get to the hard work. So with that, I will close, and hopefully we can get into some more details that people are interested in.
Well, thank you so much. I know we have some Q&A questions. So just logistically speaking, if someone has any questions, you can use the Q&A function on your Zoom on the bottom of your screen. So you can submit some questions if you have any specific type questions. But I think, listening to your presentation, talk about it too, because, I've not had the pleasure of applying to a board or commission either, though I do serve on commission as well, is, we have a grand variety of different boards and commissions out there, right? How would you suggest someone who generally is like, I want to do something, I want to get involved? How do they find the one that's right for them? Do you look at their profession? Do you look at their passion? What would you advise them to start looking at as their first thing to see what fits them?
And it should be, we know we're all multifaceted. We have our profession and what we do for a living, but we also have interests outside of that, which can be very applicable to boards and commissions. And so I suggest really looking at the list, which I know could be cumbersome, and seeing if there is something that does grab your attention. I will tell you, I feel like we have a board for every interest that you could even think of, and probably some that you wouldn't think of. And I'm going to make a pitch. for our public slots. If you see public, that is essentially a slot where it is supposed to be accountability and the people of California, and you're not supposed to have any interest in that subject matter. And I know, so that you can imagine that's challenging for us because we're asking people to essentially serve as the people of California, but in a board that I'm absolutely sure never thought existed, let alone thought about serving on. But I would like to make a pitch for that, especially for younger individuals who are kind of looking to just experience what that might be like. Those boards are really a great opportunity to do that.
And what would an example of a board what is in need of, say, a public member like that?
I would say our top ones are our licensing boards. And every profession has a licensing board, and they are made up of licensees. So you have different categories of licensees, whether it's the dental board, the nursing board. I mean, we really do. If there's a job, we have a board for it. And then the public slots are, again, people who are not at all in that profession. And you're dealing with people's livelihoods. You're looking at, adjudicating complaints as they come in, looking at the policy applicable to those licensees. So it's a really critical job. But again, I know it can be challenging because nobody ever thought they wanted to be on the structural pest control board or the podiatry board. People are not necessarily clamoring to go on those boards. So that is why I really do try to make a pitch to, and it's also a good place to start, I will say, because there are certain terms for boards. And then after those terms are up, they roll off, they cannot be reappointed to those boards. If somebody has been successful at a board like that, we definitely look at trying to retain that talent if they're still willing to serve and kind of elevating them to a higher level board or more critical type of board. So I really look at it as a jumping off point, but they are work. But I think it's important work.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm seeing a basic repetition or similar questions popping up a lot in our Q&A. But generally, of course, there's so many different boards and all do different things, but generally, what is the time commitment and major responsibilities from serving on a board?
So it can vary, which is why it really is important to take a look at the board itself. Even among licensing boards, some boards, meet, once a month and might be in a meeting for, a couple hours. Others might have more meetings, and there might be committees that are formed. Most of them have committees. Whether it's around legislation or policy or additional requirements or process, and seeing some of them are definitely heavier, but it really does depend on the type of board, which is why it's important to really talk to a deputy if you have an interest. I will say anything in education has been, described as another part-time job to another full-time job. And yet those are also the ones that are probably the most competitive, given the critical function of education in our state and across the nation. But at the same time, they also are incredibly, and I will say that's also the number one reason why people decide not to continue in service. And so that's why it's really critical. We aren't just trying to drag people there. We really want them to know what they're getting into, because it really can, add a lot to your already probably busy schedule.
Absolutely. And someone did ask, is it possible to have more than one appointment at a time, or you can only have one appointment?
The policy of this administration, for the most part, I would say 99%. In fact, I can probably count on one hand the number of individuals that might be for one reason or another into appointments. But in order to allow for the greatest amount of participation, we try to avoid putting people in more than one appointment.
Right, which makes a lot of sense. We have a question from Dawn, and they were asking, what happens when a governor's term ends? Are their appointees all removed, or need they be reappointed? Or actually, are their appointees removed and then they need to be reappointed by the next governor?
So most appointments, once you're appointed and confirmed by the Senate, you are in a term, regardless of when a governor rolls off. That's what we refer to our candidate roll up, but is when their term is over. And so you continue to serve and then obviously couldn't be considered for reappointment. We've reappointed many people that have who rolled off their terms during our administration, but were appointed by Brown. So it can vary.
Absolutely. And then we have a question that says, would you recommend using one application to express interest in both boards and commission appointments and potential full-time roles?
That makes sense. Actually, I get that a lot. There is just the one application, and when you go, there's a drop-down menu, and so you can actually click whether you're looking for a paid job or a board or a commission type of job. So you can just use the one application, and it allows you to click all the ones that you're interested in.
Okay. And this is a good question, given that we have been trying to modernize kind of how our government works in the digital era, the post-COVID era. Certainly we are on Zoom right now. But are these roles now accommodating of digital remote kind of work, or are they all coming back to being in-person meetings?
So I'm not going to throw the legislature under the bus, but I will just say the executive order that allowed for Zoom has expired when all of the emergency orders for COVID expired. I know there was a bill that would allow for Zoom to be used, but at this point, it has not been passed or signed. And so our board are now back meeting in person.
And that's the reform to Bagley Clean. The Bagley Clean Act, right? Yes. So that is something I have sort of worked on as well. And I do hope that we will make progress on it. And that is my desire to get to remote work, I guess, remote meetings, digital meetings is really important. Which one of the...
I just so that it's clear to the applicants, like it's not like a policy thing. It is, as you mentioned, it is actually a law that's in place that
Right.
requires that.
Right. That's why I like that question. It's the work that I do, and I want to make it fairer for people to be able to convene across the state. And unfortunately, there are laws in the books that prevent us from streamlining and modernizing as quickly as we want. But could you also elaborate more on which boards and commissions are the commissioners are compensated for their service?
Yeah. So for the most part, unless we have, I want to say maybe 12 boards that are paid and they're actually jobs. The one that I served on for 15 years is an example of that. And there are several other ones that are either part-time or full-time. But for the majority of the boards or commissions, when we talk about the volunteer service, the compensation is per diem, which doesn't come close to compensating you for the time that you will spend, but it is an attempt to essentially provide some compensation for the times that you might have to take off from work or spend time preparing for a meeting. And then in addition to that, we compensate for travel. So if we're going to be in person, we do pay for any travel expenses related to that service.
And do the meetings generally then occur in Sacramento, in our capital?
No, they can occur any number of places. They sometimes meet in LA. I will say many occur in Sacramento, but it can vary.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And there is a question / suggestion from one of my constituents named Dorothy. She asks, is there a chart that has all the categories of commissions and boards along with the frequency of meetings per year, number of members, and email contacts? There's some sort of where it's kind of like master streamlined so people can compare really quickly on the website?
No, that would be fantastic. Unfortunately, because we have around 400 to 500, I'm not sure that it would even be helpful to do that, just because there's so many of them that you'd have to scroll through anyway. But I mean, the day that I have a system where you could punch in meets 3 days a week, interested in this, whatever. I mean, I would love that. And I'm in the queue over here and to try to modernize our system.
Well, I'm always a big fan of modernizing our government, and being on budget committee, maybe that's something we could try to figure out, how to just have user inputs. I mean, a lot of our constituents on here obviously are tech adjacent or tech related in the world, and they have a lot of good ideas about how to streamline things. It's just on the topic of streamlining and stuff. Are there set timelines for applications? Is there a general time frame for application to Senate approval?
If you're talking about like the process from beginning from application to confirmation, sounds like, no. I would love to be able to say that this process is linear and is completely predictable. It is nothing. And I told the governor when I interviewed with him that I would be transparent about that as well, because I said I want people who are going through this process to understand it. I don't want to be a black box. I don't want to keep them guessing. And I want them to feel respected. So it really does vary. Appointments can be a lot of what we say, hurry up and wait. Sometimes we're really trying to push to get some appointment done, and then some fire pops up over here, and we shift just because every single deputy is dealing with hundreds of appointments. So as policy issues pop up, quorum issues, priorities can shift without much notice. And so there really isn't a standard, I would say, time frame. I mean, it can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. If you're looking at one of the top appointments in the state, like the UC region, it could take a year from beginning to end. So it really does vary depending on the board and depending on the priorities of the governor and just the number of fires that pop up for the deputies. What I will say is this, and the deputies know this, we encourage people to check in. We can't reach out to everybody that's going through the process because that would take up way too much time, but we really do encourage people, it's not a bother, to check in so that we can provide them with an update. And we hope that at least helps with that part of the process.
Right, and that makes sense. It's just to clarify that answer, there's no such thing as like a certain amount of months in a year is application season, right? Where it's just you're always
right.
rolling basis,
No. All year
rolling basis kind of.
Yeah, we have terms rolling off of boards all year, and then of course we have people just leaving for any number of life reasons throughout the year. So it's a constant churn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, at least in the legislature, the stability of the legislative calendar, and we know when certain things will come and when you can ask for certain things. I think with the appointments, because there's 400 or 500 of them, and everyone's leaving and changing the terms every now and then, I think your best bet is, if you're interested in something, just to put it in when it's convenient and hope that the right stars will align the right time and that your passion lines up. I think that's always the best.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because when you look at the list and it's a list of vacancies, for example, keep in mind, if you see something you really want to do, at some point there's going to be a vacancy. So, check in with the deputy if it's not already on there. Sometimes it'll show when the terms expire, but because again, the process starts before the vacancy happens many times. Sometimes it takes just too much time while we're trying to find somebody, but for the most part, if there's something you're really interested in and you don't see a vacancy now, find out when there will be one and when you need to start engaging in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we got this question, I think it speaks to the diversity you're talking about. But do you seek geographic and demographic representation on state boards and commissions, or is it more important to just fill all the open positions? So, but do you seek demographic and geographic positions? I'm sure it's important to fill all of them.
If I could just go in and plug and chug, this job would be easy. But as I mentioned, this governor came in very committed to geographic diversity and no excuses, because we know we have a vast state and it's about really engaging people. So for example, when we did our first higher ed to CSU, we only looked in the Central Valley and the Inland Empire. You can imagine how Northern and Southern California felt about that, but we really did narrow our search primarily to those areas. And we continue to do that on many boards and commissions, because we think it's important regardless of the board. It's not like, well, it's important in education, but it's not important on a licensing board, or important on workforce, or on how, but not on housing, or, so for us, we are looking to really, and have been diversifying geographically throughout the time that I've been here.
That makes a lot of sense. And then speaking of certain diversity, when it comes to professions, are legislative staff or government staff eligible to apply, or would that be a conflict of interest?
We do not. What's interesting is not only do we not get a lot of applications because staff is very busy, I think, but usually if we do get any applications, it's usually from district staff, and it's usually for something like, say, a fair board, where there wouldn't be any conflict between what they might, what their boss might be trying to do and what the board might be trying to do. So there's no hard and fast rules, but it has worked out just that there has not been many individuals who are staffers that have shown an interest, except for in actual paid jobs. We do see that quite a bit.
So it's not an automatic conflict.
Not an automatic, no. And we'll take a look at it like many times to see if there's a conflict.
Right, and fair, you mean like county fairs, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So that's something that could be looked at too. Is there a way to view what boards will have vacancies soon when people term out? Trying to see if there's a way to anticipate what's on the horizon before it makes the monthly vacancies page. Oh, someone's been paying attention to that.
Yep, right there. And then many of the boards also put it on their website. It's not required, but a lot of them do as well.
That makes
and
sense.
You can always also email the deputy and ask them. So put them to work.
Yeah. What would you say? Because you talk about some of the most coveted positions. What do you think are some of the more underrated positions, given there are so many?
It's really the licensing boards. I mean, they're the ones where people aren't. I mean, not that there's not interest. There's always interest in here and there. But there's so many boards that people just don't know that exist, and so they never think of applying for. And yet they're important jobs. We're regulating. It's about consumer protection, and the public slots in particular, but also the licensee slots are important as well. Whether it's barbering and cosmetology or I call it the repo board, but essentially the people who go and take cars that haven't been paid for. So everybody wants to be on an education board. Everybody wants to be on the Film Commission, on humanities, on the California Arts Council. I mean, and I can see why. And so I don't ever discourage anybody, but I'm just always, and I tell the deputies to just be very upfront that you can jump in a pool of 5, or you can jump in a pool of 100. And it doesn't mean we won't pick you out, but it's just a matter of numbers that what it'll be like.
Makes sense. Is prior experience serving on boards or volunteering necessary for most of the positions, or is there any sort of kind of criteria you look for?
It's not, but it's definitely helpful. Obviously, if somebody has served successfully on a board, there are certain skills you learn as far as diplomacy and working with others, and kind of the collaboration that goes with that, and also just showing that the time and the preparation that is put into serving on a board. So I'd be lying if I said it's not a plus. It definitely is a plus, but it's definitely not required. And we put a lot of people on boards that have never served on one before.
Absolutely. And this is a good question, as I think people are poring over the listings and looking at what positions are available. They say, how should we interpret the words within parentheses? E.g., there's public, labor, licensee, relative. What do these mean? Yeah,
so the public members, as I've described, are those that are really the state representative. They're probably the ones we work most closely with, also in the governor's office, and cannot have an interest, meaning can't be employed in that area. The licensees, you actually have to be, whether it's a cosmetologist or whether you are a geologist or an architect or any number of professions. We are looking for somebody who's actually in that profession. And you will also see sometimes it even specifies within that profession the type of licensee that we are looking for. And so it can get very specific. If it is a board where you're actually in that profession, that would be your slot.
What is a relative? What does relative
No,
mean?
I'm not sure. That doesn't, the only thing that I can think of, we do have some, especially in the health area where, for example, you have to be a parent, say, of a special needs child, or
Mm,
you have to have a disability in order to serve, or maybe work at a facility that provides certain type of services. So that's interesting because now you've got me curious because I should probably know the answer to that. But that's the only thing that I can think of.
it's a good one to look into. Um, but certainly, I think that gives a good overview for a lot of people as you're looking for things and you're looking for positions. And yes, we had a lot of questions about whether this would be recorded, and it will be recorded. Oh, well, it is being recorded, and it will be sent out to folks after the fact. And all the information and how to get in touch with deputies and such are going to be important for you to have if you're applying. And I know there was one or two people that had said, I applied in X date. How do I get a hold of someone, or how do I find out? Follow up with the deputy for the specific area. And that's
Mhm.
all pretty accessible on the website, right? Just figure
Yeah,
out who
yeah,
you're looking
yeah.
for.
You'll be able to see which deputy is responsible for which area.
Yeah.
Um, if it's a licensing board, it's really easy because Mary Valdez has all of them.
Mhm. And what would you say is the most challenging part of the application?
I mean, one, I don't find the application itself challenging, other than I always just try to highlight the fact that we really do get into every aspect of your life.
Mhm.
And we also vet people. We do a full social media search. So again, it's a matter of just kind of being full disclosure on, on that. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's challenging. As if I was answering it as my potential appointee self, I would say the process itself, if I'm being honest, is it can be very challenging because you don't know whether it's going to be a month or 3 months. Even if we try to guess, or we try to give you an answer, the deputies are brutally honest because I think it's important. And if for some they are smooth and it's all great, and other times, the, again, not linear. It will be like, so it's just really the patience that goes with that, and hopefully not becoming too frustrated. People are usually pretty gracious, and I'd like to think it's because we're engaged with them and kind of sharing how the process goes. But I would say that can be challenging.
Mhm. And when you do the vetting, whether it be vetting through their personal contacts or social media, is there something you're looking for that's saying like this person isn't? Is there something about someone you would raise flags about someone, an
I
applicant?
mean, it really does come down to judgment.
Mm,
One of the things we want in a board member, we want them prepared, we want them committed, we want them to participate and be engaged, but we also don't want surprises. And so it kind of gives us an insight into, is this somebody that might be potentially problematic as far as spouting off about
right.
God knows what, and you know what I mean. And one of the questions we ask on the application is really, and we ask it actually in the interview, and that is like, is there anything that would be potentially embarrassing to the administration? And so it's really about determining whether that is a possibility and whether somebody could be a liability.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes sense.
Obviously, sharing your views is not problematic. We know this governor is prolific on, on social media. And so that's not necessarily a problem. I think it's more of just like of assessing somebody's judgment.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. I am going to do one more audience question, I think, before I quickly just go over the local county boards and let you also share a little bit more. So let me just see. Okay. So also a point of just housekeeping is if we didn't get to your answer now, obviously, feel free to please reach out to our appointed secretary and her team, our deputies. A lot of them are very kind of specific scenarios that I think they can help you a lot with. And if something that we can help you with, feel free to reach out to our office as well. Are there any other questions? Let me see. All right. Well, I'm just gonna go over quickly since we were running short on time. I'm gonna go over the local boards a little bit and just an overview. So obviously we have positions at the statewide level. where you can serve on commissions, whether it be licensee, county fairs, etc. But also there are similar aspects of it by the county, by our counties and cities. So obviously, if you're interested in serving on an Alameda County board or in a Santa Clara County board, please go to these websites and look for them. Of course, we will be sending them out after this meeting as well. And then we also have for our cities at each level, we have San Jose and Fremont, not Newark and Fremont, but San Jose and Fremont. And then we have Milpitas, Newark, and Santa Clara, which will all be sent out as well. So each of these also have different layers and committees. The city level, I would just say, is a little bit more direct to, say, the policymaking experience. So there is planning commissions, biking and transportation related things. So they all have different flavors and different layers of service and policy that you work on. And obviously they all have different time schedules and responsibilities. But I think these are always great ways to get your feet in the water and get used to the service and learning more about what layer of government you want to work for. When it comes to city level, it's going to be very, very concentrated to your neighborhood level, your city level, and sometimes very material to what you're doing. The county level, it's kind of a larger expanse of the county services and what people get out of service. In the state level, it's really take your pick of it. It could be anything from county fairs, licensees to the UC Regents. Like it is like literally anything almost. So you can always get that. And San Jose and Fremont are the all year round application, so you can apply at any point in the year. And before I forget, because my team is reminding me, I also wanted to announce that we are also very fortunate to be joined by some public officials today on our Zoom call. We have Milpitas Unified School District Superintendent Cheryl Jordan. We have Sunnyvale City Council Member Russ Melton. We have Santa Clara County Board of Education Trustee Tara Sri Krishnan. And we have Milpitas School Board Member Michael Tsai, Mount Pleasant School Board Member Derek Gratzley, and we have Assemblymember Mike Fong has joined as well. Mike Fong is on here, so that's fun. And then I also wanted to thank from Fremont Curtis Brunn, who is on here as well, but who actually was a constituent idea for our bill about veteran benefits and exempting them from toll fees. So that actually what came from district. And actually later in the year, we will be having a call for bill ideas. So if you have ideas, feel free to send them our way either before or during that time. And then I will just give a couple minutes back to our appointment secretary just to wrap up. If there are any thoughts or ideas you have or thought suggestions you have for folks as they are very interested. I can tell from all the Q&A and very specific questions that people are definitely Googling it and looking up right now and seeing how they get involved. But what are some things you want to leave everyone with in my constituency?
Well, since I also never pass up an opportunity, I also want to say that we have specific appointments for elected officials as well, both in the education area and, for example, on the peace officer standards and training. Right now, we have a vacancy. And so just to note that there are many boards and commissions that are specifically have to be elected officials. So just going to throw that out there. But really, I just want to thank you for the opportunity. I'm so encouraged by the number of people and really hope that that at least my purpose, and that was to really make this a less vague process and really demystify it and show people that we want to be engaged. We have an entire team who, after I do these, gets really excited because they are waiting to see if somebody will reach out to them, because again, they are all really trying to struggle sometimes to fill some of these slots and are absolutely willing to have a discussion with you. So I just really encourage people to think about it, and if you've already thought about it and have applied, to please follow up.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us virtually, and thank you so much for really illuminating this process. Here's some important information for everyone for joining us. Like, if you want to get in touch with the appointment secretary office, there's their phone, their office line, their website, and if you have questions for us, you can always contact us again. And of course, if you registered by email to get here, you're going to get all this information, including the entire Zoom recording as well. So if you have any questions, please do follow up with us one way or the other. I'm sure more of the questions will be answered by the appointment secretary office than mine. But you can always follow up, see what's fit for you, because there's so many ways to serve our state of California, and there's so many ways to do that. And whether you're already serving as a local elected official or in government, or you just want to get involved because the world needs your passion and needs your interest right now, as it certainly does, please do that. And I also want to just echo what appointment secretary was saying, is that, those public roles are really important. If you are of the opinion that our government sometimes is too insular, this is your chance. This is your chance to come in and provide that feedback, because sometimes that perspective is so sorely needed. Sometimes it just frankly doesn't exist in these rooms without you. And if you can come in, bring common sense, just a user experience, an everyday person experience, that is incredibly vital. So highly encourage everyone to apply if you can. It's a rolling basis. It's not like the UC applications you got to apply in the fall. It's a rolling application anytime you can. And just as Cathryn was saying, get it in when you can, and then hopefully they'll come around to you. And there's no shame in, asking again, like, hey, where am I at on the process? Because they're busy. So I appreciate everyone on being here. Feel free to reach out to our office anytime. And thank you for being on our appointment workshops. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sarah.